Hello everyone, today we are experimenting a little bit further with High Evolutionary. I've started getting a lot of questions of should I buy High Evolutionary or should I buy Galactus? Should I buy High Evolutionary or should I buy this other card? Right now, High Evolutionary is so incredibly impactful in just the stats that we have access to. So for things like snap.fan or untapped.gg, High Evolutionary is incredibly efficient. A lot of the different archetypes that he's slotted into sit on the top of the average cubes gained or average win rate, and just from experience playing it, it is very hard to counter a lot of the times. Now you could throw Luke Cage into a deck, but that's a 1 out of your 12 cards of if you hit it, you can potentially still have a chance to win, but not guaranteed. And if you don't, then a lot of times you just lose. And so originally I was all for the control heavy version, but that can get pretty boring pretty quick. It's a very linear line. This one offers a little bit more flexibility, so you can surprise the opponent for bigger cube games, allowing you to have a bigger average cubes gained per game, even if it's around the same or a little bit lower win rate. And so the beauty of this one is that it is very flexible. You can finesse how and where and when you play your resources, depending on what you're facing into, depending on what you have in hand, and depending on what game plan you're going with for that particular game. So if you can hit a lot of cards early, you can drop an early Hazmat to get a free abomination. You can skip on 5 into a She-Hulk, abomination, Thing, and Luke Cage all on the last turn, and just really burst the opponent and really surprise them with how much reach you're going to have. Most of the time for me, I see a High Evolutionary deck, I immediately think the Evolved Hulk being the most impactful thing that they could do. My thinking of what they're playing on turn 6 really goes straight for the Evolved Hulk. And if we opt to not play the Evolved Hulk, and we go with several cards, a lot of times you can surprise the opponent with that play instead of going with your 22 power, just behemoth of a Hulk that you can throw on the board. And so the main idea of this one is you want to play several of your cards early. You want your Sunspot, your Misty Knight on the board, and then from there, depending on what it looks like you're going with for that game, if it looks like you're likely to do your Hulk or you're going to get your Cyclops on the board, a lot of times you are going to want to float at least 1 energy each turn if you can. But that's not a hard set every single time you have to do that. Because sometimes we're not going to play the Hulk, and it doesn't matter as much if we floated every single turn or not, because we're going to be able to do something more impactful instead, like a Luke Cage, Hazmat, and then some additional cards. So your She-Hulk on that last turn as well, just to swing that game back in your favor. Now, in my testing, I went a little bit over a 62% win rate over almost 30 games, and the decks that I had the hardest time against was a Lockjaw Thor rotation, and that was because they can get an incredible amount of high roll, and it can become really difficult to match up against it. Otherwise, I don't remember one particular deck or archetype or build that just felt like I didn't have a chance no matter what I drew. So some of your losses are going to be tactical. You're not going to have the best hand, and so you're going to retreat out for 1 and rinse and repeat so that you can capitalize whenever you have the chance to get 4 or 8 cubes instead. If you're looking for and still trying to decide if you want High Evolutionary is incredibly efficient, and it creates several archetypes that, in my opinion, make it worth having. But you also might want to wait until the patch comes down, which would either be this upcoming week or the week after, depending on any kind of delays. I think based on cadence, it should be this week. But if you're really reserved on it, you may wait until the patch notes come down to see if maybe High Evolutionary gets hit at all, and if it's still going to fit your playstyle afterwards. But overall, we're going to go ahead and jump over into a couple of games. Thank you guys, as always, for being here. Let's go ahead and jump on in. All right, next up we have Data DM. The first location is Onslaught Citadel, so we could play our Hulk there and get some value. It's also going to be a great location for us to try to leverage a rogue play, which can absolutely steal some games away. It's one of those tech cards that it's kind of like Enchantress. It's not always going to be great, but when it does get value, it gets a lot of value. And it usually results in like a 4 or 8 cube game because the opponent is so confident in their ongoing cards, and it's such a rare card to see. And so the Bucky Barnes comes down, so they're running some kind of destroy deck. I imagine they have a Killmonger. Anytime I see Bucky Barnes, I imagine they have a Killmonger as part of that destruction engine. Unfortunately, I'm going to do just Luke Cage here. I would do Misty Knight, but I assume that this gets destroyed at some point, and so we didn't want to prioritize it. But they've already dropped their Killmonger now, and so now we are free to drop our Misty Knight, let it soak, and it will be able to continue to impact the game throughout the rest of the game. I'll probably drop it next turn. Since we have the Luke Cage, we can leverage the Hazmat play They do hit our abomination, so it doesn't matter so much how many cards we have afflicted. We do have the Cyclops, though, that is going to negatively impact these cards. So we'll see. We'll see if we're able to hold this one down. Ooh, the She-Hulk is pretty big for us. I almost think we just do something like Misty Knight. We reduce the cost of our She-Hulk down to 2. That would allow us to do like 2, 4, or this plus like Thing, or this plus Rogue, and our Wasp is going to be there for free as well. So I think that's what we're going to do. Sunspot would kind of put the icing on the cake here if we had it to soak with this extra 4 energy, but I don't think it's going to be necessary. Ooh, so they drop a big death into Stark Tower. It's a lot of power to overcome. So we're still, what, 12? We're still 11 behind. We do draw a Hulk, but I don't think we prioritize that. If we do Hazmat plus She-Hulk, plus Wasp, that's going to be the 9 power here. 1, 2, 3. That brings it to 12, plus the -2 from Cyclops. We're going to impact this by 14. I think we do this. There is a scenario where maybe we can get enough value from just doing like Wasp here, and then the Hazmat, but I don't know. I feel like we want to put as much reach into that right lane. Ooh, so they do a null, which our Hazmat, or our negative affliction does help us a little bit against that. We are going to be able to hold down the left and the right location. Their null play at the very end was not quite enough reach for them. And luckily they used their Killmonger early so that we didn't have to worry about it. We could then focus on how we were going to bring home the remainder of the game. Now, oddly enough, had they played their null here, they would have won. They could have played their null into the Onslaught Citadel had it doubled up, but then they knew that they wouldn't be competing for the miniaturized lab at all. So had we put anything there, we would have been able to win that one at that point. So we will take the 4 cubes where we can. What a kind of strange way to start the video. Let's go ahead and take the 4. We'll jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Stream Sniper. Let's see him snipe this stream. First location is Elysium. So we're gonna be able to play our Sunspot, let it soak. We can play it on turn 1. It does get 1 power of value. And then all of our other cards are gonna be reduced as well. So we're gonna get a massive Hulk by the end of the game. They play Nebula, they play a Nightcrawler. I'm curious what they could be running here. I think we're going to do just our Wasp this turn. Next turn, we'll do Cyclops so that we're negatively afflicting them just as much as they're growing. But I do like the idea of skipping and soaking here. And so I'll use the free resource to stop Nebula from growing. I don't think we're going to need it as that surprise burst factor. We have a couple of other ways up our sleeve to make that happen. And Play High comes down, it's Sabretooth, nothing huge for us. So we're going to do the Cyclops here. It's going to make us have a cheap abomination. We can skip and soak with the She-Hulk. We'll have several ways to make their plays very inefficient. I almost want to snap into this, but we don't have any of our like end game, late game, just like finisher styles. So the Cord comes down. That's 3 1-cost cards. I'm curious what they could be running with this setup, whatever this setup is. I'm so curious what they could be running with this. I'm going to play the Sabretooth now, just for value. We could play the Rock to stop the Nebula from growing, but we are going to negatively afflict it with our Cyclops, which I think is fine. They could have Luke Cage, but if they do, we're just looking to maybe draw into our Rogue to steal it away. They have the Miles Morales, so maybe this is the like control heavy build that I posted, but I don't think I ran Korg or Nebula, so it seems a little strange to have those included as well. Now, if we skip and soak here, She-Hulk becomes free. The Abomination becomes, I think, 1 after this turn because of the Dream Dimension. I think we just skip and soak here. If this is the control-heavy version, they don't have access to Spider-Man. They don't have access to Professor X. Oh, they do, courtesy of Elysium. Well, okay. If they do, then we're just fighting for one of the other 2 locations. And yeah, they do, don't they? No, they have a Black Bolt, okay, which gets rid of the Rock. We're perfectly fine with the Rock going away. We don't need that one. The Abomination is 1. The Thing is, gosh, we have so much reach here. And yes, they probably have mean, what's the best they could have? They could have Rock Slide plus Hawk plus Stature, maybe? They go first as well. I think it's a Hail Mary play, but I think we Rogue in the right lane. Something is telling me Rogue in the right lane is the way to go. We're going to Rogue in the right lane. Maybe steal away a Hawk? I don't know. This is where we're going to set it up. If this doesn't hit anything and they don't play for Camp Lay High, then we're actually going to just lose that one. We have a lot of value across the rest of the board, so I think that's where we're going to lock in. And we'll see. We'll see if we get the read right. My gut says if I'm them and I'm going to use an ongoing card, I use it in the one that's the easiest to steal away, and then I support this one with things like Stature or Rock Slide. I don't know that wins us this lane, but it's satisfying to have that Rogue steal it away from us. We at least force the tie in that lane. Incredibly satisfying. And then we have the Abomination, we have the Thing, we have everything burst on the board. That is just such a surprise factor that we are able to steal away the 4 cubes. We will, we will take it. And then this one wasn't necessary, but it just kind of added salt into the wound that we were able to anticipate where the ongoing card was going to come from. We will take the 4 cubes. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Bird. They start off with a Nebula, so they're going to be wanting to scale, get Elysium, which allows us to play and curve our cards a lot more freely than we would otherwise. It also allows us to do a free She-Hulk and Hulk on the last turn, which I think is phenomenal. There's a small chance that we'd be able to do all 3, so Hulk, She-Hulk, and Abomination. Just have the entire squad fly down on the board on the last turn would be phenomenal. Well, that's unfortunate. Luke's bar comes down, and there is no way that we can impact that location at all anymore. Like, that is just a dead lane. Well, it is what it is. They do have Misty Knight there, so they do have... we know that this is High Evolutionary. Okay, so the Iron Lad... I haven't been sold on the Iron Lad's value in very many games. Like, sometimes he's great. Sometimes he's going to grab you a Dr. Doom, but for me, he always grabs a rock. He's a 4-cost rock. Ooh, wow, we get Wong. Would it be wrong of me to say that hitting a double Hazmat would be one of the highlights of my day? This is beautiful. We do a Hazmat here. She-Hulk goes down to almost nothing. We can do another Hazmat. We do have the Luke Cage. As long as they don't have some way to steal this, it doesn't really matter that they have the ability to continue to go wide with their Dr. Doom. I almost want to snap back into this bird. I know you started with Nebula and Misty Knight in Luke's bar, but you forgot. This is Luke's bar. Luke Cage is there. He has to win this location. Let's go with the Hazmat play. We're going to skip and soak with the rest of our energy. They do play High Evolutionary. They are continuing to curve their cards incredibly well. Now, if they have a Luke Cage, we have to hit it with Rogue. That is going to be so incredibly important to be able to do. We get the 0-cost Sunspot to skip and soak here. How do we want to play this? I think we play our She-Hulk. We drop our She-Hulk in X-Mansion. We hit them with one more Hazmat to make sure that Nebula cannot scale. Next turn, we can do both Hulk and Hazmat, or we can do Rogue and Hazmat if they drop a Luke Cage. Just such a fantastic X-Mansion for us. You're so rude. You're so rude, Bird. Luckily, we do have our She-Hulk that we played over there, so the Spider-Man lock is not complete. Plus, we have the Hazmat play to negatively afflict their cards. We will take it, though. Right now, we are still losing in Luke's bar. If it was a double trigger, that would be phenomenal, but unfortunately, it is not. The Abomination is free. An abomination. What an abomination. There's no way that we can rogue counter anything. We got to go this now, which does bring them back in line, exactly in line with us here. They do have a Dr. Doom that they could go here, here, and here, so they could win this lane. That's not enough for them to win X-Mansion. I do wish we had some additional. I wish we had some additional reach, something a little bit better. They hit us with the fist bump, so I assumed they were going to retreat. They thought they had Luke's bar locked down, but Luke had other things. Technically, Hazmat had other things to say about it. But in my head, Luke had other things to say about it. We had an explosive last turn play. We are able to hold down against the Iron Lad that hit a really good go wide target, making it a little bit harder to find those wins. We were still able to make it happen. Let's go ahead and take it. We'll jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Rumham. The first location is Daily Bugle, so we get a little bit of insight into what they have. But they have the 1 out of 3 shot of having our Luke Cage as well, unfortunately. We know that they have the Storm, so I don't think we're going to play the Storm. Depending on what they grabbed from us, that could be really detrimental. So the Big House is not terrible for us. In all honesty, we have the She-Hulk, we have Abomination that will be able to get into that location eventually. They could storm that location though. So they got our Luke Cage. So if we draw something like Rogue, that is so much value for us. They're not going to anticipate. Let's go ahead and do Luke Cage. We're gonna do Luke Cage in the same lane as their Luke Cage. That way they know it's protected from Enchantress. But what they don't know is that we could have the Rogue that's gonna just line them up. It's gonna be beautiful. They do use Storm on us. Ugh. Okay. We do skip and soak when they didn't. They used all of their energy there. We're gonna restorm the location. It's not the best like value, but right now Cyclops, unless we get Rogue, is not gonna give us any value, and so we're just gonna restorm it. We're gonna restorm it. We're gonna be able to play there one additional turn. They do play Nebula into that location, and so they are skipping and soaking this turn. But by biding our time one additional turn, we are able to do either the Abomination or the She-Hulk. We could even do Cyclops, but I don't think that's going to be the play that we go with. I kind of think we go with a She-Hulk here. And then next turn, we have the ability to do like a Hulk. Our Wasp is not going to give us much value here, if any. Maybe we just give up the Storm location. We've committed a lot of resources there. Maybe we just give up on it. Nah, you never give up on family. This is our family, our little family, with Misty Knight kind of kicked out to the side. Okay, so they play for the Daily Bugle. Interesting. Do they skip and float here? No, they they play an Abomination as well. How do we want to play this one? Our Hulk is huge. This is a huge Hulk. Let's see. How many times have they floated energy? Just the one, right? Just the one with Misty Knight, because they played this one 1, this one 2, this one 3, this one 4, where they floated, and then this one 5. So we have floated 2 to 3 times. We've floated 3 times compared to their 1. We do have initiative, which is unfortunate in the Monster Metropolis. If they do a Doctor Doom, that goes wide, but that's not enough. If they have a Shang-Chi, that's huge, but still not enough. Let's go Hulking through the right lane. I don't think they can match our power output because we used our mana technically more inefficiently, but we were floating our energy more efficiently, and so we were able to have a bigger Hulk, or maybe they didn't draw into their Hulk. Either way, we are able to hold it down versus the kind of the hybrid lockdown that didn't have like that staple on top of like the Spider-Man Professor X. We will take it. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Rock, and the first location is Oscorp Tower. They have a Quinjet, which tells me this is probably like a Hawk deck, a Dino deck, some kind of deck that wants to lean in on Moon Girl. And so, I don't know. We're going to go ahead and do... We play Misty Knight into... Yeah, let's go ahead and play Misty Knight into Sinister London. What our hope is that it bounces into this unknown location, because if it goes into Oscorp Tower, we are going to send them that resource, which is a little bit unfortunate. I'd almost rather have 2 of them anyways. And so let's see. No, it go okay. Rude. The second Misty Knight goes into Oscorp Tower. I now think we have to skip here. We skip and soak. Sakaar is going to pull into one of our cards after this turn, but we want to make sure we don't send anything else their way. Technically, the Misty Knight over here gives us another target for that negative affliction, which is somewhat decent. If we can get Luke Cage and Hazmat, we get so much value here. They do play their Kitty Pryde. Our Hulk comes down and just smashes the board. So now we clear up our later in-game, and we can lean more into like a She-Hulk, Abomination, Thing type of combo, which is going to be so much power that it pumps out. We could steal their Zabu, but I think we maybe aim to steal something from Sinister London instead. Let's go ahead and skip here. They could have a Shang-Chi eventually for the Sakaar location to overcome this amount of power. Okay, so the Angela and then the double Kitty Pryde, that's pretty big. They're going to be able to bump up this Angela massively over the course of the game. I do wish Angela had popped here and then they would have been capped out in this location, but it's okay. It is what it is. I want to surprise them with how much we're going to be able to burst on this last turn. So I'm just going to do Wasp. Like, we could do She-Hulk this turn, but I want to be able to do She-Hulk, Abomination, and Thing on the last turn. That's my vision. I don't know if it's a good vision. That's my vision nonetheless. The Wasp comes down. They do play one card into Sakaar. Our Abomination is not going to be 1, unfortunately. It's going to be stuck at 2. Let's see. The Shang-Chi does come down in Sakaar. And so now that one is capped. That location is completely capped. They do grab initiative going to this last turn, so we could bamboozle. Ooh. We could bamboozle them. Instead of Thing, I think we go double Hazmat. That is going to negatively afflict these 2 cards, but it's going to negatively afflict their 4, and then their however many here. We can go double She-Hulk, double Abomination. Or would we rather just do 1 trigger of Hazmat and get 18 power doubled? I think that's going to be more beneficial. Like, it's fun to do the Hazmat play, but I think this is more practical. We want to do Hazmat first, though, so that we're not afflicting our cards. We want to do Hazmat first here. And then as long as one of these cards bounces here, we'll win this lane. And if they bounce both here and here, we might have a chance to overcome the amount of power that they have. That's my read. They did snap into it, but they grabbed initiative off of us on that last turn with that Shang-Chi play to give them the freedom to like really focus on Kitty Prydes and just bouncing and having that much value on the board. That I think we're completely fine. Most of the time you see a High Evolutionary deck, you really think that the Evolved Hulk is their like biggest bang for their buck. But with this version, we have a couple of other tricks up our sleeve. Now, they do have a lot of value, a lot of power in their Sinister London location. I think we still overcome it with the double 9 power drop. So we do, and we win the right lane. We don't quite win the left lane, but that is perfectly fine. We slamming 18, 20 power on the board and negatively afflicting their entire board presence is huge value. Even though we lost the Hulk, we did not lose the war. We will go ahead and take the 4 cubes. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Bodish. The first location is New York, so we'll be able to maneuver our cards on the last turn, even though most of the time we don't play a lot of our cards until the last turn, depending on what kind of deck it looks like the opponent is running. So seeing the negative hood, it could be debris junk, it could be a bounce. There's a lot of different versions or decks that this could be. Second location being Project Pegasus. I have mixed emotions or mixed opinions on. We could play the High Evolutionary, but I'm just going to let this skip and soak. That way Cyclops will start negatively afflicting their cards, and we'll be able to go from there. They do have the Viper, so it could be like a debris junk, which is very unfortunate. Green Goblin as well, which is also very unfortunate. And so we expect a debris at some point. We expect maybe a Polaris to maneuver some cards, and just makes it difficult for us to find a reliable way to win. Now, we have a cheap She-Hulk here. I think we go ahead and play the cheap She-Hulk. They could have a Shang-Chi, but with this, if they wait until the last turn, then we might be able to maneuver it out of this middle lane and into safety. We're going to do the Misty Knight. That will allow us to buff up the rest of our cards over the course of the game. We have our Wasp to lean in on if it looks like they're going to aim to cap out some locations. And right now, we want to keep our lanes relatively safe, if at all possible. We have the Rogue, High Evolutionary, Hazmat, and Wasp. We're just going to skip here. We're going to skip and watch the game unfold. They could do the double tandem of like a Polaris and a Titania to cap out a lane. We also want to be cautious of those like maneuverable cards to make sure that we're not going to accidentally cap ourselves out in one of these lanes too early. And so we do not have the Hulk. We don't have Abomination. We don't have Luke Cage. And so I think we're just going to play Sunspot in mid and let it soak. And then we're looking to do some kind of play, some kind of bigger play on the last turn, depending on what card it is we draw into. If we draw into Luke Cage, then it's going to be the Luke Cage Hazmat Wasp style play. Ooh, they go Doc Ock, which is always a little bit bold, a little bit brave. Our Hazmat comes down, the Wasp comes down, negatively afflicts these cards. Cyclops negatively afflicts them. And so they can move cards over. If we happen to draw into Luke Cage here, beautiful, beautiful value for us. Because that's going to bounce all of these cards in the right direction. We're going to absorb 4 here. Misty Knight will send a +1 somewhere. And we could do High Evolutionary or Rogue, but I don't think we're going to have a good road target in the Tinker's Workshop. So we're okay just playing Luke Cage, which is a fantastic top deck, by the way. We're okay playing just Luke Cage. That's going to impact all 3 lanes in a positive way that could end up surprising the opponent. Hopefully it ends up surprising the opponent. We do end up getting the 1 cube retreat against the junk deck that did a pretty good job. If I had to kind of gauge this on their ability to clog, they did pretty good. The only concern would be them being able to cap out this location. Becomes a little bit difficult. They could have a Titania, but do they have additional low cost cards? Or are they kind of stuck with some bigger things like Spider-Woman, which again, with Luke Cage would become less impactful. Well, we will take the 1 cube. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have D. Joda. The first location is Moir Island, so we're going to go ahead and play our Sunspot on turn 1. He's going to get back to that 1 value, even though he doesn't have anything to soak just yet. Expansion comes down, making it more difficult for them to do something like a Galactus, because that takes up 1 of their 2 spots. The Mojo comes down. Interesting. So it could be like a junk deck, like a Debris Clog style deck. And if so, like a Rogue would be pretty decent to steal this Mojo away, especially if it's kind of as that like surprise factor. I think we're just going to do Misty Knight here. Next turn, we can do something like just Cyclops, and that's going to give them quite a bit to deal with in this left lane. Now, a Killmonger is, of course, going to clear up like 50% of this location for them. Time Stone, ooh. Okay, so this is an ongoing, like a Thanos Zoo style deck. An ongoing version. I think we're okay against that. Like, we have enough raw value, enough raw power, and with a Zoo deck, of course that is going to give us a lot of targets for things like Hazmat, get a much cheaper Abomination in the process as well. So let's go Cyclops, Soak, and maybe on turn 5 we go Wasp, so that we can do like a She-Hulk, Abomination, Hazmat on the last turn. If we can draw Luke Cage, it's going to be phenomenal here. Otherwise, maybe we shy away from the Hazmat play. We don't know for sure. But with this being a Thanos ongoing, they might have a Luke Cage hidden somewhere. We'll see. They do have a lot of ongoing stacked. We can expect the Spectrum at some point, which is a good value. It impacts the entire board, but I don't think it impacts it enough to make it worthwhile. Now, the Luke Cage, of course, would bounce them back drastically. Okay, so our Abomination is 3. If we did something like this, that'll bounce Titania back. It's going to negatively afflict 1 card. It brings it down to 2. She-Hulk is going to go down to 1, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No. So instead, we can save this. Maybe we don't skip and float for the She-Hulk at all. Maybe we do thing to bounce Titania back to their side. We're going to afflict this one by 3. We're going to inflict this one by 1. That's going to make the Abomination only a 1 cost. We're okay if it's a 2 cost. We're going to go with this. We're going to go with just the thing. We're going to send them Titania back onto their side of the board. They may send it back our way and cap it out. We don't know for sure. We don't have our Rogue. So depending on what they plan on playing, I think we're still in a really, really good spot. Devil Dino is big, but I don't think it's going to be big enough. Like, we can't play there without giving them an extra 6 power, but I think that's okay. Our Abomination actually became 0 instead because of the Cyclops trigger. So we do have the free Abomination. We have the Rogue, which has 2 good targets out of 3 here. I mean, we got to go for the 2 out of 3. And then we can do... Gosh, we have such an explosive... We have such an explosive play here. if we do Rogue, we can't do both Hazmat and Luke Cage. And we definitely want to do both Hazmat and Luke Cage. They could scale this one by up to 246 with a Spectrum play. And so we want to make sure we're impacting the rest of the board. And so I think the Hazmat is going to be, that brings them down right now to 26. We skip and soak, so that brings us up to 26. The Cyclops brings them down another 2. And so that we would win this one by 1 unless they do a Spectrum. And if they do a Spectrum, they can't really impact the other board, the other lanes as much. So I think this is our play, not capping out the Muir Island location, not going for the Rogue play, even though we do have it. Ooh, the Blue Marvel is big, but it's not really that big in the grand scheme of things. Like, it helps them make sure they lock down Muir Island, but we have such an explosive play in the other lanes that it's not going to be able to help them win, unfortunately for them. We will... Ooh, wow. And wow. And so between the Sunspot Soak, between the Misty Knight hitting this lane, we were actually able to overcome the deficit here as well, even with only 3 cards, which is wild. We will absolutely take the 2 cubes. Let's go ahead and jump over into, I think, one more before we call it a day. All right, next up we have I Am Troop. Their title says Flammable Stay Back. And seeing the Beast avatar, and it could be reading too far into it, but I'm assuming like a Human Torch bounce style deck, so like a lower end bounce mechanic deck. It's just me reading too far into it potentially, but that's what their avatar and their name is saying to me. They do play Kitty Pryde, which does kind of support that, which is wild. We don't have waves, so we're not gonna be able to restrict them just like flooding stuff. Hopefully we can negatively afflict like their Human Torch before it moves. Hopefully we can negatively afflict it enough where doubling it is essentially useless. And so we're going to go ahead and do the Sunspot. We're going to stack the Misty Knight in that same location, and then we'll go from there. And so this is one of those games where maybe we don't want to drop initiative so that we can afflict a Human Torch target before it goes anywhere. And this could just be a regular Beast bounce. And if so, I think we're okay. Like, Beast is still good, it's still valuable, but we have so much impact across the board, across the game. Maybe we can still make it happen. The cards aren't going to reveal this turn, so them playing Kitty Pryde won't get it back into their hand. So they're not going to be able to scale it this turn. We could do like a Wasp. We're just going to skip and soak, though. Managing initiative or priority might be really, really critical in this game. Be able to afflict all of their cards negatively with Hazmat would be the difference between winning and losing. So depending on how restricted their board space looks, depending on what the rest of their cards look like, will determine how and where we want to play our cards and how much we want to fight to reveal first going into the last turn of the game. Now, the good thing about a bounce deck is that they're very unlikely to have something like a Killmonger, seeing the Iceman. They're very unlikely to have something like a Killmonger. Now, we do have our She-Hulk that we can play, and we're still skipping and soaking, which is going to be great for us. We have the Wasps negatively afflict some cards. We don't have our Abomination, so I don't really want to rush that out. We have our Hazmat if we want to negatively impact the board state in a wider variety. They do have the Cloak. Interesting. And so then there is the Human Torch coming down. We're not going to be able to afflict it before it doubles. Like, that would have been so big to be able to do, but we're not going to be able to, unfortunately. But what we can do this. We're going to play Cyclops into Necrotia. I assume that they move their Human Torch. They probably do something like a Doctor Strange to move it out after this turn. But since we reveal first, we're going to hit their Human Torch before it moves that second time. So maybe we can disrupt what their highest power card is that Doctor Strange can pull. And so the Human Torch comes down. There is only 2 targets for our Wasp to hit. So we're going to bring it down to 1, which it technically is like 3, I think, still. I don't know. It really depends on when this triggered. Right now it's saying 0, but I think that's actually 2 outside of Necrotia. I don't know. It gets a little bit too iffy. Now, we do have initiative going into this last turn, which is unfortunate. They did pull in all of their afflicted cards. They didn't move dagger, so they do have the free kitty pride. I think we're going to go with something like this. We're not going to skip and soak, so Cyclops doesn't do much for us here. But I think we're going to play Hulk. We have a decent lead in Lemuria already, and then we'll see. We do get the retreat. The affliction against specifically like the Human Torch movement, or against like a Deadpool deck, is so detrimental, because doubling a 1 power Deadpool, that can start snowballing. Doubling a 0 power Deadpool is a dead card. And so we will go ahead and take the 1 cube retreat. Not a super exciting way to end it, but that is where we're going to end the video. For a Hazmat build that allows you a little bit more flexibility than like the rigid blocked or rotation, where you can get some low rolls, the structured play of like a control deck where it has to be XYZ, or else you retreat and leave. This offers a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of finesse for you to find ways to either steal the opponent's power, place your own power, and it feels a lot more interactive than the other versions. And so I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to give it a like and a comment down below. And as always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.